Yeah, my question is for Dr. Kinabo. The CAADP process is a very important process for the African continent. Every single country is involved. It's about monitoring investment in the agricultural sector in the respective African country. And recently, the dietary indicator was included. How practical is this?
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we have included that so that you can see the diversity of the kind of foods that people are consuming. But now it will be even more significant because that will now determine what should be produced so that we meet the dietary indicator. What are the kind of situations like environment or input that should be brought into the production arena so that we meet the dietary indicator that we have. So the significance here is that that dietary indicator would dictate what should be produced in all other areas in the continent. And this is what I see the significance of having diet and consumption to really determine how we should produce our foods. And this is going to be really important in Africa within the CAADP, as you are saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Akmal Siddiq from the Asian Development Bank. I know in the previous session you said we cannot make any comments. Can we? Thank you. Thank you very much. We have, in our part of the world, in Asia and Pacific, we have studied some of these systems. Two key lessons we have learned. Smallholder farmers, as we all know, grow 50, in fact, 75, 80% of the food. Modern agriculture is not a cup of tea for smallholders. And great majority of these smallholders literally have been turned into slaves. They don't make fair return on their investments. So unless there are policies by the government to change the whole economic system, and this is a long debate, but the bottom line is all this discussion is going to come to naught until and unless smallholder farmers become profitable. And nowhere in the history agriculture has ever prospered. You take North America, Japan, EU, without government doing two things. One, policy, which is very dynamic, changes sometimes weekly, sometimes 6 months, and a regulatory framework. None of this exists in Asia Pacific. These governments are sleeping over this whole problem. And the last point I want to make is food safety has not received enough attention. What we eat in this region is really contaminated, and by the time in 24 to 36 hours ends up on consumer's table, it's decaying. And people are getting sick by the day, and they are dying. So these are very complex problems, and I think we can discuss all day long all these. Unless governments take their responsibility from the front, things are not going to change. Sorry to spoil your lunch.
Thank you. And I see others nodding, and very important points on regulatory frameworks, the responsibility of government. And I'll say on food safety, I was very pleased to see, Shankuntala, you had a whole slide on this issue related to fish. Jess and I were at the Vatican for a Pontifical Academy of Sciences event linking food safety and healthy diets together. And for some of us, it was the first time we saw these two crowds meeting. And I think that's important, the food safety sector, if you can call it that, and nutrition and food. You know, let's bring these groups together and start talking about this issue. So thank you for your comments. Let's go back to questions, if we can. Yes, I think you were next, sir, there in the third row.
My name is Warren Lee from FAO in Bangkok. So I'm very pleased to hear about what Professor Kinabo mentioned about consumer demand need to be heard. And we need to empower consumers so that their voice can be heard. But how to do it? What would be the solution? When you look at some poor urban jewelers in Bangkok, like some poor drivers and some cleaners. They eat the food day in, day out on the street. And also they drink a lot of sugary beverages and lots of salty foods and fried foods. How can we empower them so that we can organize them together to exert some pressure or like a feedback in the food system, so that the manufacturers of food can hear, and the government need to create also an enabling environment so that the consumer's voice can be heard, and the regulatory affairs and also legislation can be in place so that they can enjoy a better nutritious food for them. So I would like to hear your comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. One area I would imagine is consumer associations. They've worked in other areas. So if consumers can be organized in groups, one step. Secondly is about information, education, knowledge to consumers. One area that I said is a missed opportunity is the school environment, where all these people go through. That they go to primary school, they go to secondary school, and enrollment has been high in all continents. So we can reach these people in schools and provide them with basic nutrition education and the things that need to be done to really access a more nutritious diet. But again, we need to give them information where they are, because now they're in that situation. So we need to provide information as to what is considered to be a healthy diet. Because sometimes we say a poor diet, and then not many people understand what a poor diet looks like. So we need to define it and inform others about what makes a poor diet and what are the consequences of that poor diet. The food industry, the food environment, that's another area that we need to really focus our attention. How do we empower the food environment, the vendors, restaurants, to really provide the kind of foods that are needed by consumers? But that drive will come from the consumers themselves. If they go and say, I don't want this kind of food, obviously the supplier would heed to that and provide the kind of foods that consumers demand. Governments, I think, policies on consumption, policies on what is being sold, and legislation, these are kind of things that can actually help to make sure that we address this issue of poor diets and promote consumption of healthy diets. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running short on time now. We have a question from a woman in the second row. Sorry.
Yeah. Ismahan El-Wafi from IFPRI. So my question is to Mahendra, but also to the other colleagues. So I think all of the speakers has been calling for diet diversification, be it for nutrition purposes, but also climate change. So what's holding the government from putting the incentive in the right place? Why are we still seeing subsidizing of staple crops like wheat and rice, whereas what I'm hearing is that we need to subsidize something else?
Yeah, in the morning, Prabhu mentioned, the Green Revolution, and it started in the 60s, 70s. But some of these policies are still continuing. I mean, we have Agriculture Prices Commission giving minimum support prices for rice, wheat, but not for other crops. And also the fruits and vegetables is increasing, but still, affordability kind of things. Even animal source foods, only when income increases, they shift to the non-vegetarian food, animal sources. So the governments are doing, but it's not enough. Now that's why we have to push them towards how do you shift the, to diversified cropping pattern, as well as, well, I just want to go on small farms. On small farms, it's an important one, because 86% of the land holdings are from small and marginal farmers in India and other countries. see, in the medium term, they have to shift to the rural non-farm employment and all. Even now, they are doing multiple jobs in rural areas, not only agriculture, but non-agriculture. But you can't shift them in the next decade or so. So you have to organize them, what kind of policies are needed for credit and other kinds of things, and organize them into groups is an important one to get the economies of scale from input marketing as well as output marketing.
Thank you for this opportunity. I think I'll go back to the question on CADAP and also respond to yours. I think what the indicator of data indicator in the CADAP was really to stimulate diversity in production. Because if you have that indicator, it means that production will also hit to the indicator that is put in that. So we are looking at diversification of production. But another thing is that traditionally our production was really diverse until when we got this new technology of monoculture, where you see just one stand of maize or wheat or whatever. But we used to have a small plot and we planted everything. But this has changed. So we are coming back to that now, that if you have a small plot, can you grow everything? And governments have not been paying attention to these other foods. I think, I don't want to blame FAO, but then it's about, we have focused much attention on energy when we had energy deficiency and forgotten about these other micronutrients. And now we need to go back and invest on these other crops that make a diversified diet. So that planning and support for production has been on serious, not even roots and tubers. So even the statistics we see in governments, we don't see much of what vegetables, legumes, or fruits are being produced, only about maize, livestock, and all that kind of thing. So we need to change that perspective and include everything in the way we need the nutrients. 42 different nutrients a day. I mean, you cannot get that in maize and rice.
So we are nearing lunchtime. We don't want to hold you back from that, but I think it would be fair to give our panelists one last moment to reflect. I'm not, for those of you who were here earlier, Earthryn Cousins, I don't know if she's here, she gave the panelists one word. I'll give you a sentence. A fragment or a sentence. Maybe Ian, we could start with you, or actually anybody will just jump in. Do you have any final reflections on this panel? Two words, okay. Diversified diets.
I think this should be everybody's concern about eating a healthy diet. Everybody, individuals at household level, government, food environment, food industry, everybody.
Yeah, one word is women empowerment is one for nutrition, obesity, all kinds of things, and of course the diversified diets. Yeah.
Huge challenge in internalizing a whole bunch of externalities that are going on in production agriculture, and that's one of the factors that's really a challenge for us to look forward to.
Great, thank you. Please allow me just 2 minutes. I'll try to summarize a little bit what we heard from the first three presentations, and then just now some of the takeaways from this discussion. I have 5 points, and I'm sorry I've missed many, but firstly, we talked about food policies, and they should span value chains, and they should start to look at the supply of food so it's more diversified. Number two, we need dietary transitions to diets with an appropriate level of animal source foods. We need changes in food production systems, and also, again, in particular, in related to animal source foods, but also staple foods and more climate friendly as well as nutrient enhanced. Biofortified crops hasn't come up, but that's one solution. Number four, reductions in food loss and waste came across quite strongly. And I think that is something that's really going to help us come to more sustainable food systems. And then fifthly, something that came through in some of the comments is the need for alliances and partnerships and to involve all the different sectors. So, we have to talk with the private sector, with the public sector, bring them together, civil society, but also we talked about the food safety and the food nutrition folks also need to come together, and we need to start talking a lot more in partnership. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and have a good lunch. Thank you.